Now to my special report for you tonight. President Trump has seen some setbacks in several fights with Congress, majorities overruling him on the war in Yemen and trying to declare national emergency at the border. And there's new attention on the Republican with the most power to potentially constrain President Trump, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. There's even a D.C. narrative arguing that McConnell's standing up to Trump on certain issues. Now, like many D.C. narratives, be a little wary of the premise here.
The Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, going to the floor to praise Kirstjen Nielsen. He didn't criticize the president, but that's implicit.
The president renewed his threat to close the southern border today. That was met with a sharp response by the Senate's top Republican.
Mitch McConnell urged the president to go slow.
This rattled a lot of Republicans this week with the president raising health care again.
I'll tell you who today sent a very clear signal to the White House was Mitch McConnell, who is smarter than the average bear on this matter. He just dropped that rock as fast as he could. This will go nowhere.
The emerging claim here is that McConnell may be some kind of check on Trump's impulses. One network also reporting today that McConnell's softly rallying Republicans to push back on Trump's interest in putting Herman Cain on the Federal Reserve. But I want to be very clear tonight. Those are exceptions to what McConnell's actually doing the vast majority of the time, working as a relentless enabler and enforcer of the Trump agenda. A choice that he didn't have to make. He leads a co-equal branch of government. He has far more experience within the GOP than Trump, and this is a choice that shows McConnell is a key driver for how Trumpism has taken control of the entire Republican Party. And we know many top elected Republicans don't really genuinely support everything Trump does, because in 2016, so many, from Paul Ryan to Ted Cruz, were fighting to stop Trump, and they argued at times he was the antithesis of their values. But on virtually every key issue for Trump, McConnell gets his back. Take the current battle to try to obtain Donald Trump's tax returns. McConnell took Trump's call to prioritize confirming a counsel at the IRS to support Trump. That's an unusual post for any president to even be personally interested in. Or take that recent and rare rebuke of Trump by some Senate Republicans on the war in Yemen. It was bipartisan, but only despite McConnell's effort to stop that vote against Trump. Or take the tax cuts, which critics said ballooned the deficit. McConnell was all about them. Or take this longest government shutdown in U.S. history, where McConnell obstructed the votes that could have passed the budget that there was agreement for, even though McConnell also warned Trump that he would be boxed in a canyon, meaning he also thought, apparently, it was a bad idea. Then you have McConnell's aggressive use of his Senate powers to expand Trump's impact on the federal courts for a generation. Now remember, when Obama was president, McConnell fought against changing the Senate rules only to ram through Obama's judicial nominees.
No majority leader wants written on his tombstone that he presided over the end of the Senate. Well, if this majority leader caves to the fringes and lets this happen, I'm afraid that's exactly what they'll write. Because in his own words, on the Senate, the majority leader's own words, breaking the rules to change the rules is un-American.
Un-American, that was then. Now McConnell leading a change to the rules this month to ram through more Trump judges. In fact, McConnell's gotten 66 of Trump judges confirmed, 2018 alone, which has drawn much concern from some Senate Democrats.
This is a very sad day for the Senate. It's crucial those rules not be twisted or abused for partisan advantage. The majority, by taking yet another step to erode that legacy, risks turning this body into a coliseum of zero-sum infighting.
Democrats also pointed McConnell's Supreme Court power grab. He wouldn't even hold a hearing or a vote on President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland. The news of Justice Scalia's death was still sinking in across America. The funeral hadn't even been held when McConnell joined Republican presidential candidates in a rush to announce they would not even consider the president's as yet unnamed nominee. We are here witnessing this news, a seismic and unexpected event in the Supreme Court. Justice Antonin Scalia on the court for 30 years, passing away.
Tonight, the top Republican, Mitch McConnell, says this court vacancy should not be filled until a new president is elected.
There's nothing about having a year left in office that precludes President Obama from replacing Justice Scalia on the Supreme Court.
Plenty of people thought that kind of hardball was a reach. Republican elders were bracing for Trump to lose, but Trump did win the Electoral College, and it was McConnell's attack on those democratic traditions that effectively doubled the number of high court vacancies that this President Trump has already gotten to fill. Now, McConnell's support for Trump's conduct goes well beyond tactics and conservative policy. This is important. He's personally blocked bills that might hold Trump accountable or harm his standing. He stood by Trump during attacks on the foreign countries like Haiti and their citizens. And when President Trump said, to his great shame, that there were good people in that crowd of white supremacists amidst the violence in Charlottesville, Senator McConnell couldn't step up to address Trump's comments by name, instead offering only his view that there were, quote, in general, no good neo-Nazis. So contrast this quailing inability to confront Donald Trump to an older throwback McConnell, who even once touted his old boss and mentor, Senator John Cooper, for backing a civil rights bill despite opposition in the South. Take a look.
The correspondence into the office was overwhelmingly against the civil rights bill. And I remember asking the senator, why are you over on the floor leading the charge? And he gave me an answer which is essentially that you don't simply wet your finger and figure out which way the wind's blowing before deciding what to do. In other words, they send you here to lead.
Necessary. And saying the Voting Rights Act was essentially intact, so he wouldn't hold a vote. My, how things shift. Now, when McConnell is pressed on some of the above or the way Trump governs, he does fall back on something. You may have heard this. It's something that many Republicans who used to voice opposition to Trump talk about. It's an invocation of America's institutions in general, which might be a check on Donald Trump in the White House.
I think in a day when people were voting for change, they didn't decide they wanted to change the Republican Senate, which I'm proud of. Everybody looks at last year's election and says it was a change election. Well, it was in the presidential race, but in the Senate race, it was not a change election.
He touted the Senate's victory there, and then he talked about institutions that protect America's balance of powers. But what McConnell seems to forget or elide or maybe just blatantly deny is he leads one of the most critical institutions to guard against those kind of problems, the upper house of the co-equal branch of the federal government. Now, what you saw there was right after Trump's election. Over 2 years in, we know McConnell's virtually always sided with Trump over the institution he leads. Now, there are plenty of politicos or cynics who may shrug all of this and say, well, of course, Ari, politics is a team sport. People are loyal to their party. What's new? And yeah, that's true for certainly a lot of people and a lot of politicians. But on the big things, I want to tell you tonight, it's not always this way. And when you look at civil rights or Charlottesville or matters of foreign policy, you don't have to go back that far. As I just showed you, it was in McConnell's lifetime recounting the story of senators standing up for civil rights against party. It was also in McConnell's lifetime that politicians from the institution he leads, the U.S. Senate, stood up to an incumbent Democratic president in their own party on a matter of principle. It was Lyndon B. Johnson's fellow Democrats, like Eugene McCarthy, who took him on over something bigger than partisanship, over doing the right thing in Vietnam.
We must undertake at all times, so far as we can, not to do the wrong thing for the right reason.
So here we are in the process of carrying out a Republican foreign policy. The administration talks about bipartisan support, but it's not Republican support for a Democratic policy. They're asking for Democratic support for a Republican policy.
That was how Democrats explained standing up to a president they thought was doing something wrong, regardless of sharing the party. And we are a long ways from that. I certainly admit that. Now, no one can read Senator McConnell's mind, to be fair. We don't even know if he does feel any particular opposition to certain things Trump is doing. We can read the polls, though, a rough comparison showing that nationally, Democratic Party's favored about half the country. Donald Trump comes in at about 39%. McConnell, in his home state, sits even lower at a 33% approval rating. So despite all his experience and power and strategy, Senator McConnell is less popular than Trump nationally and far less popular than him in Kentucky, and they are both up for re-election in 2020, which means, yes, Senator McConnell's career may turn far more on this president than on other people, and other popular Republicans may not be as nervous as he is. So we know that Mitch McConnell used to recount the lessons of using power to do what's right and risk defeat when it's worth it. He may have reversed on that old advice and now focused on doing whatever it takes for him to avoid defeat.
You don't simply wet your finger and figure out which way the wind's blowing before deciding what to do. In other words, they send you here to lead, and ultimately, if they don't like the way you do that, they can defeat you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.